If it's a landscape area that's relatively popular, I'll say get there early, because that way you can set up for the exact composition you want, and then anyone who arrives after you, whether it's the general public or other photographers, whoever it may be, they will see that you're ready to take photos and they hopefully won't get in the way of you. Hello and welcome to the All About Photography podcast. I'm your host Pien, and here we're going to discuss all things photography related. We'll cover different photography genres, topics related to photography as an art, and also the business side of it for those who are running a photography business. And welcome back to the All About Photography podcast, where we discuss anything and everything photography related. A new episode comes out to you every midnight on Monday Greenwich Mean Time, so depending on where you are in the world, it may either be Monday morning or Sunday evening. And you can find us on your favorite podcasting platforms, whether it's Spotify, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio. But you can also now watch the videos of the podcast on YouTube. So you to the YouTube audience, hello, here's your weekly wave. All right, and to get into this week's topic, it's something that comes up often, not just amongst photographers, but of those who are being photographed as well, which is, should you get upset at people who walk into your image when you're out doing photo shoots? And there is no easy way to answer this because this is a very polarizing topic and everybody's got their own opinions on it. I'll be the first to admit my opinions on it can polarize people. Some will agree, some will disagree with me. And everything I'm going to say moving forward is purely that, my opinion, because there is no right and wrong. It depends on the situation. Depending on the situations depends on how you should react to it and also how you can work around it as well, more importantly. As an example, if it's a busy location during a busy time of the day, then you just have to accept people are going to get in your image. There's just no way around it. If you've something like a train station in the middle of peak hour in the middle of the city, that is not the best time to try and do a photo shoot because everybody else is trying to live their lives as well. Now, you've got lots of people getting on the train, lots of people getting off the train, and then you want to try and take photos on the platform. To expect people to walk around either you or your photographer, or if you're the photographer to walk around you and your customer whilst you're getting the pictures, is just a little bit unfair. Some will say very unfair, but I'm going to play it safe and say a little bit unfair because you are effectively asking who knows how many people to walk around you so you can get the images you want. And there won't always be the space for people to walk around you depending on how you've set up. Sometimes they may be able to, but most of the times they just simply won't be able to, because there isn't the space. And to ask people when there is no space to try and get cramped out so you can get an image is a little bit unfair. All right, there are ways to work around that, like set it up in a way, and like there are ways to work around that. Like if you can somehow get a longer exposure, get your subject to stay perfectly still and have people walking around them so there's motion blur for the public, but your subject's in focus and is sharp and is not moving. That way they stand out in a cool street photo versus them just standing there in front of a train and there's people in the background or whatever the case there may be. Would it be nice if they walked around you and you're a subject when you're taking photos in the middle of a train station? Yes, obviously it would. Sometimes that's just not feasible. And you just can't get annoyed at them for walking in the middle of your shot because you have actually chosen the worst time of day to go and take photos at something like a train station. If you really do want to do it, find a quieter train station and go at a quieter time of the day where it's less of an inconvenience to everyone around you. But if you've chosen the busiest time of the day and a busy station, then I'm sorry, but people are going to get in your image and you just have to deal with it. And similar to that, it may not be a busy location or at the busiest time of the day. It may just be a popular location, at which point there are also ways that you can work around it or ways you can handle it, so to speak, if people get in your way of your photo. If it's a landscape area that's relatively popular, I'll say get there early, because that way you can set up for the exact composition you want, and then anyone who arrives after you, whether it's the general public or other photographers, whoever it may be, they will see that you're ready to take photos and they hopefully won't get in the way of you. All right, because this way you can also take as many pictures as you like as the light changes and you're waiting for the right conditions or whatever the case is, and then you don't have to worry about anyone getting in the way most of the time. I have seen cases where people have seen photographers ready to go, and then someone from the public will just go and sit right in the middle of the shot because they feel like it. Depending on the situation and where you are, it depends on how it can be handled though. And I've actually seen this happen to one of my favorite photographers where they were ready to take a photo, a bunch of other photographers were ready to take a photo, and they were right up to the end of the cordoned area, so you couldn't actually go any closer than they were. And a couple decided, you know what, we're going to step over the line and sit down and have a picnic, and they got in the way of everybody's photo, which I can understand wanting to get the right view, or the nice view I should say, But at the same time, if you've gone somewhere you're not supposed to be and you sit down in the middle of photographers who know, and you know that they're there to take photos, that is a little bit unfair of you as well. Right, but as a photographer, there are ways you can rectify the situation, so to speak. What I found helps is that if you're just polite about it, you let them know what's going on, what you're doing, and just politely ask if they can move a little bit so they're no longer in your shot. Most of the time, whoever it is that sat there will be very understanding and accommodating and will move. But at the same time, if you're not polite about it and you're pretty rude about it, like, hey, get out of here, you're not supposed to do it, blah, 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 you're often not going to get the outcome you want, and it's going to cause more drama than is necessary. So that's one thing I've found, is that if someone's in the way, if you're just polite about it and let them know what's going on, most of the times they will be accommodating and understanding. The minute you're not polite about it and you're rude about it, you're often not going to get the outcome that you want out of it, and you've just ruined not just your time, but that person's time as well. So just bear that in mind. And again, this is just speaking from my experience. This is not something that always happens. It may always happen, it may not. It's just my experience that I've had so far. Sometimes having the human element in a landscape photo actually adds to it. It actually happened to me back in Sydney when I was down shooting at Watson's Bay. The light was nearly ideal, and some kids decided to start fishing because it was also the ideal time to go fishing. But because of the lighting conditions and the fact I was using a longer exposure, you couldn't see any detail. They were very dark because they were backlit, and I was exposed for the sky, so they were effectively looking like dark shadows and a silhouette. And because of the long exposure, there was a little bit of motion blur, so it actually added to the image. I actually prefer having them there fishing than them not there fishing. It does look great without them fishing, don't get me wrong, but because you have that human element added in, it gives a sense of scale and perspective that wasn't there before, and is actually added onto the image instead. So depending on the situation, it may actually be beneficial to have the human element in there, but sometimes I can understand also where it may not. And that's when it goes back to just be polite about it. There's no need to be rude about it if you need people to move. If it's a location that you know is only busy at certain times of the day, like anytime after mid-morning as an example, then go there early morning if you can to get the images. Or if you can't and you have to be there at a time when you know it's going to be busy, then you do just have to accept that people may walk into your image sometimes, and you will have to work around it. One way you can work around it is take multiple images, same exposure, same setting, same everything, and then with Photoshop's masking, just mask out the people from in between the different images. It does require a little bit of extra work, yes, but you're still going to walk away with the image you want, and you haven't annoyed everybody else who's there just so you can get the image you want. And also because if you do get annoyed at people walking into your image, what does that actually accomplish at the end of the day? Nothing. You just get annoyed. You're like, oh, so many people are in my image. Like, you're in the middle of the city. That's going to happen, right? You have to find a way to work around it. And that's why I take multiple shots and then I clone them out or mask them out, whichever you prefer, depending on what it is you want to do. Even in the city, having that human element in there does also add to the image as well. Especially if it's night photography and you're doing a longer exposure and there's the people there have a bit of motion blur to them instead of completely fixed, it adds to the image compared to if they're just stable. Not stable, but sharp. All right, like if it's a quiet location, it's a little bit like if it's a landscape or the city where you have to get to your spot early if you can and hope that people walk around you. But at the same time, you do also have to work with what you have. All right, take as many pictures as you like before there's anyone there. Or if there are people there, then again, use the masking option like I mentioned earlier. And if it's a quiet location, whether it's the landscape or the city, whatever the case is, work with what you have. All right. If you're hoping to try and get a picture with as few people as possible, and that's especially important if it's a time critical image. Like if you know you've got a 5 to 10 minute window where the light's going to be perfect, and outside that 5 to 10 minutes, you're not going to get the shot you want, just let them know it's for a couple minutes. All right, like I was actually at a hotel having dinner once where we actually got asked to move for 10 minutes because they were trying to take some pictures of the restaurant at night and they didn't want to have anybody in the shot. So they organized it for our table to be moved. They moved our drinks and our food and everything. And they got the image and they said, thank you for understanding and you can go back to your table now. We'll move everything for you. And because the staff at that restaurant was so polite about it, we had no beef moving for them. Especially me because I'm a photographer and I knew exactly what they were trying to do. But the rest of my table didn't have an issue with them requesting it either because they also understood it's a business. These people are trying to do some work. There's no point being rude about it. On the other hand, if they weren't very polite about it, saying, hey, we're taking photos here, you can't sit here, that might have been a slightly different outcome. The main takeaway that I want to say is that if you do need people to move from your photos, unless it's a very busy location at a very busy time of day, be polite about it, please. And one last thing I want to say about this topic, which I know will be very polarizing. I know that right before I even started, but I'm going to say it anyway, which is that if you're the photographer or you're the one being photographed and you're getting annoyed at people getting in your shot because it's the middle of a busy time or whatever the case is, and you post about it on social media, don't be surprised if there's some backlash. Would it be nice if everyone walked around you so you can get the images you want? Yes, of course it would be nice. But at the same time, depending on the location you're in, if it's a busy spot and you want it to take up quite a bit of space to get the images you want, and you want to get annoyed at people because they're walking through your image, either because they're completely unaware or they aren't able to walk around you, then I'm sorry, you just have to work around that. Getting annoyed at them for that is just a little bit unfair. Not everybody can walk around you and your photographer. Not everybody can just stand still for however long it is to get the shot you want. Because I've come across it where a photographer did want to take the photo and they actually cordoned off people for 2 minutes to get the photo they wanted. So you can imagine how many people got annoyed by that. And then that photographer got a few filthies in the process. Right? So if you are going to post about it like, oh, I'm so annoyed, people will keep walking to my shots and it took so long to get the image I need, expect some backlash. Some people will be in your favor and say, yes, it is annoying, which I can agree. Yes, it can be annoying. But at the same time, if it's a busy location and there's lots of people there, it's just something you have to deal with. And even talk with your subject to see what they think about having the other people there in the photo as a background element. The other people don't have to be in focus. You can use that long exposure for motion blur that I mentioned, or you can just take one image of them where nobody's blocking them off, and then you as the photographer take multiple images of the background and then mask everything together is an option you can do as well. Yes, it's more work, but it's better than people giving you filthies because you're like, oh, get out of my way, I'm taking photos. All right, so if you do post about it and complain about people getting in your image, do expect some backlash. It's going to happen because, like I said at the very beginning, everyone's got their own opinions. Not everyone's going to be the same as yours. Not everyone will see it the same way, and some people will be vocal about it. I've actually seen it on a few posts before, and I decided not to comment because I knew it would only be adding fuel to the fire. But I read through the comments and some were in agreement that yes, it's annoying, and some said, well, deal with it, you chose a busy spot. So it varies. But because you are posting it on social media, you do have to expect a little bit of backlash in the process. Let me know what you think. Are we right to be annoyed when people get in our shots when we're out taking photos, or is it just something we have to deal with? And how can we handle it if they are in our shot as well? I've always gone with it's easier to attract bees with honey than it is with vinegar approach, because I found that with anything, not just when I'm out taking photos. When you're nice about it, you're much more likely to get the outcome you want than if you're rude about it. Let me know. As always, my email address is available for you in the description below, and I would love to hear from you. And if you would like to stay up to date with future episodes, don't forget to follow us wherever it is you listen to podcasts, or if you're on YouTube, to subscribe to the channel. This is your host, Pien, signing off for this week, and I look forward to seeing you on the next episode. Have a good one.